In this lesson, we're going to learn about the animation tab and how we can actually use that in our visualizations. So the first thing I want to show you is that I've already gone ahead and attached a forest pack scatter to the surface. Now, this is the object that I've already animated. Let's go to perspective mode quickly and have a look. So I've already animated it just using a very simple bend modifier. So if I scrub the timeline, you can see that for 30 frames, the animation just bends from one point to the other. After that, the animation ends. So let's go into our camera mode and have a look. What I've done is already I've simply just gone into the forest pack, geometry, custom object. That's all I've done for now. I've just added that. Now if you scrub the timeline, nothing is actually happening, even though the object that we have is animated. And that is because by default, if you look underneath the animation tab right over there, it is set to disabled. So we need to pick one of 4 different ways. We got follow geometry, random samples, random from map, and then frame from map, and then a couple of extra options here. We also have a map slot, and then we have this option here, animate only at render time. Now, if I click on follow geometry, which is the very first one, this is the option that is going to say follow whatever geometry I have attached as obviously a custom object. So whatever object, custom object, preset, whatever it is that you've added here, if it is animated, all I want you to do is follow the geometry. Now if I scrub it again, you will now see that it's animating and it's going exactly as per the geometry we have. If this is ticked, it means that it'll only animate at render time. This is just to conserve your CPU and GPU when you are using forest pack. If it is ticked, you'll see that nothing is animating. So if you are following these steps, make sure that you have unticked this just so that you can see it in the viewport. Now remember, it ends at frame 30 because our object ends at 30. If I had to, for example, move the animated time frame, let's say all the way to the end, then our animation would obviously carry on moving. So the follow geometry follows exactly what the geometry piece is doing in terms of animation. The next thing that I want to show you is underneath Scene Explorer, we have 2 spheres over here. Unhide the very first one, and I'd like you to scrub the timeline. You can see that I've got a sphere that is going. Let's press F4 so you can see it. It is animating in all 3 of the transitions, meaning it is moving, it is changing in scale. You can see the sphere is getting bigger, and it's actually rotating. Now if I come inside my forest pack over here, what I'm going to do under geometry, I'm just going to disable this so I don't have to add it again. So let's click disable. Let's add another one, and I'm going to add the sphere over here. For now, we can leave all the settings as is. It's not an issue. If I scrub the timeline, nothing's happening. Let's go underneath the animation tab, and you can see that it is ticked on follow geometry, and yet nothing is being animated. Now the reason being is that forest pack is not picking up any of the actual animations when it comes to the 3 types of movement. When I say the 3 types, we talk in transition, which is movement from left to right or any direction. We got scale and we got rotation. There is a way around this. In the layers tab, if you can hide that sphere and unhide the second sphere, let's go into forest pack. We can remove this forest pack, it's not a problem. Add a new one, custom, let's select this one. And now if we scrub the time, you can see that the animation is the same. It is moving, changing scale, and it is rotating. But now this time, forest pack is actually seeing the animation and using it. The reason being this one is working is if you want to animate an object in the 3 transitions that I've spoken about, which is transition, which is your movement, your scale or rotation, clicking on the sphere, I'll show you, you need to use what's called an X form. So very simple. Underneath the modify list, just press the X button, have a look at your X form, which is that option right over there, and then if you go into the drop down box, you'll see a gizmo. This gizmo is literally the way that you would animate. So let's do that together. Let's delete this so you can see the sphere is not doing anything right now. I'm going to go underneath the modify list. Let's press the X form right there, auto key. So I'm going to grab that gizmo. I'll move the timeline all the way across. I'll move the object all the way. I will grab the scale function, and let's actually rotate it. So I've rotated it in all three of the parameters. Scroll all the way back, and now you can see it's following the animation. So really important, remember, use the X form. Scene Explorer, let's hide both spheres. Let's go back into our forest pack and let's delete the sphere and reactivate the custom object. So scrubbing left to right, you can see the animation is on follow geometry. Another tip, when you are wanting to animate objects, either have them all attached together as an object and then animate it that way, or using a proxy and then exporting that proxy with the animation frames will be your best bet. Okay, let's dive into the next one, which is random samples. Let's scrub all the way to 0. Now random samples is going to randomize the entire animation of all the frames. So let's activate random samples, and immediately you can see it's changed. So what it's done is from frame 0 to 30, it's randomized each object to start at a random frame, which gives obviously a lot of randomization. The time, offset, and count parameters are available here. Now, in very simple terms, these two parameters work as follows. The time offset mixes up when animations start to avoid that robotic look, and the count increases the variety of animations that you're going to see, keeping things interesting and random for you. So if we work on our example over here, so this blade of grass, for example, starts at a 45-degree angle. It goes all the way to -60, and then it goes all the way back to 45. So it is ranging between a 45 positive all the way to -60 and then all the way to positive 45, and we have 30 frames. Now, if every single object of here, let's call them blades of grass, if every single blade of grass started and ended the movement at the same time, which it does if we look at the follow geometry, just like that. Now if your grass or your trees or anything that's been animated animates like this, it's going to look very robotic and not natural at all. So we've got these two settings over here. Let's go back to random samples. So we've got time offset and count. So time offset, if for example we leave it at 10, this little trick is going to scatter the starting times of each blade's movement within the first 10 frames of the animation. So one blade will start off at, let's say, frame 0, then you got another one that will start at 3, then another at 8, and so on and so forth. So the time offset, the first 10 frames will be randomized between all of the blades of grass. So that way not every blade of grass is actually bending and starting at the same time. Then there's the count, which in this instance is set to 4. This is like saying that we've got 4 different variations of movement or ways the grass can bend, which means that out of all the blades of grass, you're going to mix up the bending motion, so some might bend a little less than 45, some might lean a bit more softly, and so on and so forth. So it's not just about when they start moving, but also how they move. This diversity in motion is really going to help with the realism of your animated objects, especially if they are bending or swaying or anything like this. So to summarize, within my 30 frame bending animation, setting a 10 frame time offset and a count of 4 means you're not just animating the grass, it's almost as if you're kind of orchestrating a whole field of individual blades, each doing their own version of the bend and the sway at their own pace. So that's the time set and the count, and that also works with the other options. For now, let's dive into random from map. So let's scroll all the way back there and random from map. Now random from map, you'll see that we can still use time offset and count, but we also have a map slot here. So I'm going to activate the material editor, and right over there we've got no map. So all you need to do is click here and then you can choose a gradient map. I've already got one set over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag that into the slot and say instance. So now we are using a gradient map, and this is going to help us actually map the animation. So the darkest parts of the map, which in this instance are the black pixels, will correspond correspond to the starting frame of the animation sequence, and the lightest parts, in my example will be white, will correspond to the ending frame. So the shades of gray will represent the frames in between. So this gradient map is going to influence the animation by mapping the variation of the animation frames across the scatter based on the grayscale values, which means it's going to give us a lot of variation and control on how we want the animation to start and end. So we've got a gradient map in there, and if we just close that for now, we can scrub all the way across. So let's go all the way to the beginning, and just one quick look here, you'll see that it starts with the dark pixels and ends in the white pixels, and you can see that the dark parts right over there, they are starting in their starting position. And as we scrub across, you can see that the gradient map is now controlling how this actually will work. The functionality of this map is unlimited really. If we change the W value, you can see immediately how I've changed the map. So the starting ones are at the top, and then the bottom ones will move. You can obviously make swirl maps, you can make noise maps. There are an infinite amount of different variations that you can do when you're using a gradient map. Next we have is frame from map. Now this one needs a couple of additional steps in order for it to use. The main idea of frame from map is allowing us to take a certain portion of an animated object and only manipulate that portion using a map. So for example, in our instance, this object here, we only have 30 frames. If we go underneath Scene Explorer, let's unhide object 001. I'm going to quickly zoom into that object right over here. Now you'll see that the object has a wider range of animated frames. So from 0 all the way to 60, I've used the X form where I've allowed it to grow for the first 60 frames. From 60 to 90, there's no animation. Then from 90 onwards, it's the same animation that we just discussed with this one. Back to the camera mode. So what we're going to do at this point is tell the forest pack animation to only work off the first 60 frames, and I'd like to manipulate the first 60 frames using a map instead of the entire animation. So I'm going to go into the forest pack item. Let's actually delete this object, add a brand new one, which is this guy over there, and now we have that. So if I scroll left to right, it is still using the random from map and the gradient map. We're going to switch it to frame from map, and as I activate that, we lose the time, offset and count parameters, but now obviously we have the start and end. So we just discussed now that we only want to manipulate the first 60 frames. So let's do that. The next portion is to understand, as you can see, nothing is animated, and that is because the gradient map has to be animated. So when you're using frame from map, you have to actually animate your gradient map. So let's go into the material library here quickly, and I've already prepared an animated gradient map. So I'm going to attach this one right over there and say instance, and now when I scrub through the timeline, you will see, based off the gradient map, and you can notice here it's animating, that for the first 60 frames of the animated object, that's all we are using for the actual animation, and the remaining frames, as you can see this object here is still animating, we don't want to use. So we are only using the first 60 frames of the actual animation, and we are only applying the gradient map to the allocated frames over there. I want to show you how I actually animated the gradient map. It's very, very simple. So let's clear this guy right over there. Let's go no map. Let's go to gradient wrap. Click and drag into a new slot, say instance. So right now we have frame from map. We only want the first 60 frames of that object right over there. So what we need to do now is just animate the map itself. Auto key, and you'll notice that there is a red square around that map indicating that we're going to animate it. So let's go all the way to 200. Now you'll notice I've gone to 200 even though this animation's only got 60 frames, and that's okay, we can still do that. So all I'm going to do at this point is at 200 we can easily come here and say offset of -2 as an example and press enter, tiling 0.2 and press enter, and if you untick auto key you'll see there are these little red arrows there. That is to indicate the actual map is animated. Now if we scroll across you can see what we have created. And again, it is only using the first 60 frames of our object's animation. nothing more. And that is it for the animation tab.